Hello, nerds, and welcome. I'm Ryan. You are listening to Crossing the Nerdverse, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts Eric, Clark, and Jimmy Bones. Tonight, I'm super excited. I'm thrilled. It's a little weird to be doing it without Travis, but I have to admit, I'm so stoked to be talking about Warhammer 40,000, which I'm going to refer to as 40K nearly exclusively for this entire episode.
It felt weird to hear it referred to as 40,000, I'll be honest.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, guys. It's going to be a super exciting episode. There's a caveat right out of the gate for anybody that's listening. This is going to be an episode on the fundamentals of the setting. We're doing this primarily because of the success of the Space Marine 2 game, which is out now. All of us are very excited about it. We will not be discussing any form of spoilers in regards to the Space Marine 2 story or anything around it. We're also not going to be talking about much of the lore from what happens in game specifically, but we will be referring to fundamental lore that comes up within the game that we are already aware of. And so we are super excited. We hope you guys are too. And we are going to try to keep this episode as spoiler free as possible in regards to Space Marine 2. For those of you that are currently working your way through the Black Library Warhammer 40K literature, I can make no such promise. So if you are currently reading the Horus Heresy or any of the other novelizations, we're probably going to spoil the shit out of all of that. So, what you got, Bones?
I was just thinking about this while you're talking. Do we know the time frame for the game?
I have a basic understanding of the time frame of the game.
I had no idea. I was like, I'm not sure when it occurs.
I have no clue about the game. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
To be
so
honest.
actually, we'll cover that initially. Let me. I'm bringing up all of our chats right now, so super excited about it. So the game takes place in kind of a strange way because Space Marine 1, which we're all kind of familiar with and what goes on there, happened about 200, maybe 150 years before Space Marine 2. There's evidence to suggest that Space Marine 2 is actually a single century afterwards, but I don't think so. It also takes place just after the Great Rift. Yes, many of our listeners don't know what that is yet. We're going to cover it. Just after the Great Rift and the fall of Cadia, and the advent of the Primaris. And so the game actually takes place relatively present in as far as the game's lore goes. Much of what we end up seeing in the game is a Primaris frontage.
Era
Did we lose Clark?
Idamus?
Oh.
Oh, no. Did I go away? I'm back?
Indomitus.
Maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, you're back.
In the 41st millennium.
So yes, the era.
Woohoo!
The era Indomitus in the 41st millennium is exactly right. This particular era is noted by the fall of Cadia, the 13th Black Crusade, the Great Rift opening, and the advent of the Primaris Marine, which, as far as lore goes, was a whole mess by itself when it came out in the actual miniatures game. So the first things first, as we kind of get into this, I think all of us are at least familiar with what 40K is, right? Everybody at least plays some version of it. Clark, I know you have an army. Bones, I know you have an army. Eric, if I understand it correctly, you both read the books and play the video games. So we all have at least that going for 40K. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I got an army too. I just haven't painted it.
Oh, gotcha. All right,
Travis has currently been conscripted to paint my army.
Well, here's the thing. The first thing anybody that's listening to this that doesn't have any kind of fundamental understanding of the 40K universe needs to understand is that 40K, Warhammer 40,000, kind of is the birthplace where we get the description grimdark. This is a fictitious far future that does not have any actual like good guys. Everybody's kind of a bad guy. Everything's super relative, and everybody is fighting for what they believe is the right thing for the most part. There are exceptions to that rule. But it really is, we call everything grimdark because the opening line that's been used by Warhammer 40K forever, which is, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And so that's kind of point number one, I would say, if I'm telling somebody that knows absolutely nothing about Warhammer 40K, is that this is all bad guys. This is all relative perspective, and more so as you attempt to learn about this through, reading the books and reading the wikis and playing the games and doing all this kind of stuff, I think it's actually really important to note that everything is viewed through secrecy, deception, and unreliable narration.
And religion.
Which, yeah. So that's kind of the key starting points. The reason I'm going to open with those notes is because for many of you listening, there may be something that we talk about that from one author's perspective in a book or a video game deviates significantly from what you understand from the lore that you found in your codex or, reading a book about your army or your perspective. That's to be expected. The lore is unreliable and is highly swayed by the perspective for which it is written. Within this fandom, there is a very loud but very small group that is just hardcore, sweaty lore guys. And I think the entire fandom's kind of gotten a bad reputation by these people for being kind of gatekeeping and sexist and kind of frustrating to deal with. That's why those things exist, is because the setting itself is designed to be interacted with by a fan in a way that is kind of meta. Like, you're supposed to understand that no matter where you're at in the universe and what you're dealing with, you're only getting nuggets of truth spread out throughout all the perspectives. So, let's go ahead and get started. Obviously, the inspiration for this show is the Space Marine 2 game that is coming out. I'm very excited about it, planning on picking it up in the next couple of days. Bones, you said the same thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna get it probably tomorrow, maybe the next day.
Excellent. I know, Eric, you already beat us to the punch. You've been jamming on the game the last couple of days, right?
Yeah, but don't tell anybody. I don't have any money. I wasn't supposed to buy it.
You got it. I'm sure it's
Are
safe
you
between
playing it
us
on your
and the open
Steam
internet.
Deck?
I will say, just so everybody knows, it does not run very smooth on Steam Deck unless I don't know how to do my settings.
Wait, you can play Baldur's Gate 3 on your Steam Deck, but not Space Marines 2?
I mean, there's a lot of different stuff going on in Space Marines versus like a kind of static Baldur's Gate.
So
yeah, I'm just more thinking just like file size.
Well, see, the thing is because, and we did just real quick about the game. I know slightly off topic, but we had talked about it last week. I think James brought it up, like the way that they do the like groups of people now. Like you can shoot the individual, not all of it. So like, and since the beginning of the game, there may or may not be some stuff people have already seen where there's a few swarm thingies. So needless to say, that does bog down the Steam Deck.
That's
now
fair.
You can kind of get by, but it's very agitating because it's lagging and you're trying to attack and everything else. So,
what platform are you playing on then? PC?
Yeah, so I got it. Yeah, I got it on Steam.
Okay.
So I'm reverting to my computer to get through this beginning, and hopefully it won't be as swarmy for the entire game. I don't know. We'll see.
Gotcha.
I think their swarm mechanics is supposed to be like one of the game's like breakout features, because I do know that the mechanics of it were supposed to be much different.
It's based on a game that they made previously. This is a World War Z game, so they developed this specifically for that game, for like the zombie hordes, and they can have up to like 500 individual monsters or zombies in that case in a horde on screen in the foreground, plus like thousands in the background. They adapted that to do the Tyranids.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's oddly intimidating too. Like when you see the fucking just the mounds of them coming, and like as you're shooting, and it's literally like one. I'm like fuck. So
that's actually that's good to know, because that gives a good tangible feel for the Tyranids. I like that.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Like the swarm aspect is probably one of the coolest things I've seen in a video game in a long time. Just where it gives you that extra feeling of being overwhelmed. It's not just like cool. It actually does like, I don't know. For me, it kind of amps it up a little bit because I get frustrated. I can't kill everything on the screen.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So, I guess the best place to start, again, fundamentals, right? Warhammer 40K takes place in the Milky Way galaxy in the year 40,000, and that's already a lie, but that's why it's called Warhammer 40K. I forget exactly what year we're supposed to be on in the current
something.
canon. Yeah, 42,800, something, I don't know, something like
that. Yeah.
And there are two things you need to understand about the setting that I think is going to be really important. First, where the setting is, which includes when the setting is, and kind of the history of the setting, because there are a couple of major historical events that shaped the game and the story into what it is when you're talking about broad reaches. So I am going to open with the fact that nearly the entirety of 40K takes place in the Milky Way galaxy, over hundreds, if not thousands, of planets, with very little influence from outside of our galaxy, with a notable exception being, of course, the Tyranid. As far as the history goes, I think it's probably best, especially because anybody that's joining us as a fan thinking about getting into Space Marine 2, it's going to be the Horus Heresy. And so, does everybody feel like that's a pretty good spot to start, or?
Yeah, I feel like that's where you kind of have to start. There's stuff that happened, previously. Like this all started essentially because of AI, which I think is kind of a relative, like a good point given today's kind of feeling towards
definitely valid, right?
But yeah, so essentially, like the beginning is AI trying to eliminate humanity. They didn't. Now it's all banned. There is no AI in the 40K universe. It's banned.
At least there's
So
no
that I
open
didn't know.
AI
Okay, yeah.
in the 40K. Yeah.
I didn't realize that's why they banned AI. I knew they did, but I didn't know why.
Oh yeah, the whole prehistory Men of Iron.
It actually stands
humanity.
for abominable intelligence now.
Yes, I remember that.
So yeah, okay. So effectively, there are only a handful of key figures that take place in this history that you need to be aware of. And I think the most influential and most important to talk about, of course, is going to be the God Emperor of mankind, who has been around forever and ever and ever, and is worshipped and delivers miracles all over the galaxy in the name of the Imperium. And ultimately, the big things about this one you need to know is that he is a mutant called an Eternal, which means he doesn't age, he doesn't anything, he's just there. He's an extraordinarily powerful psyker, which is kind of a psychic space magic user. And that he desperately did not want to be treated or seen as any kind of deified figure at all. Which should paint a pretty decent picture of what we're dealing with in 40K. And so, yeah, the God Emperor of Mankind, effectively, I think the best way to describe him is he's the most powerful human-esque feature that kind of brought the Imperium into the galactic stage. And, he's very powerful with psychic stuff. He's an extraordinary warrior. And he decided to take his little primal, primitive planet, this tribal planet that we call Earth, which is referred to as Terra in setting, and take it into the stars. And he did that through, I guess, genetic manipulation and an incredible understanding of technology.
And religion.
Actually, the religion didn't come about for thousands of years after that. Like, the big thing about the God Emperor of Mankind is that he kind of saw religion as this weakness of primitive culture. Like, he thought that manipulating the masses through religion was a vitriolic, very, very, it was a gross thing to do, right? And he figured he sure is, and he can't do a damn thing about it. So yeah, he wanted an age of enlightenment. He wanted extraordinary understanding and expansionism. Now, he still was very much like, go mankind, conquer the universe for humans. That was a major motivation when he developed the first kind of precursors to the Space Marines to act as this galactic invasion force. But yeah, he was not big on the whole "you're a god" thing, and he dealt with it most of his life. And he couldn't stand it.
So sad for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're a reality warping psychic manifestation and a 12-foot tall human titan Adonis, like, what are you gonna do?
Jesus, I didn't know all that.
Oh yeah, he's crazy. They called him the Giant. They called him the Titan. He was crazy. There are some reports out there that say he wasn't 12 feet tall and that he was only 8 feet tall. but I mean, 6 of one, half dozen another when you're comparing it to primitive mankind. But yeah, he was a major figure, nearly unkillable, all but immortal. Like he had the lottery win of things go right for him, right?
Genetics.
And he spent thousands of years, because he's an immortal. He gets to go vampire theory here, developing the genetics and the technology in order to conquer the universe. He saw the Earth as a very limited resource. He saw Terra as breaking under the weight of its population and of infighting. And so he developed the first Adeptus Astartes, which at the time were called, Bones, help me out here, the Storm Legions, the Storm Warriors.
That sounds right.
I don't know enough about the lore yet. I'm still working on it. I like the
can't
orcs.
Google anything or else my
The Thunder Warriors.
Thunder, that's it. Yep.
computer crashes.
So there were 3 iterations of his super soldiers. You had the Custodes, which came before everything, but the Custodes, the Adeptus Custodes, are kind of guards. They're meant to protect Terra. They were the first iteration where he tried the super soldier kind of path, but they were so difficult to make and came in such small numbers that it wasn't a feasible way to create legions. And so the Custodes were, for all intents and purposes, clones of the Emperor. That's not accurate at all, but it's pretty close. It was genetic modifications for existing humans using the Emperor's genome in order to create a super soldier. Then the Thunder Warriors came, and this was when he took the experiments from the Custodes and tried to mass produce them. And the Thunder Warriors were pretty successful.
I love the name.
Yeah.
Like, that is just the best part.
Thunder Warriors?
The Thunder Warriors.
Makes me think of Thunder Buddies from Ted.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
there
just
you go.
think Thundercats.
Tundre gatos. Tundre homies.
But yeah, I guess you're right.
But yeah, no, the Thunder Warriors they had a distinct purpose. And he made a bunch of them, but their job was to conquer Earth. And nobody really thinks about the fact that the first planet the Emperor invaded was Earth.
Makes sense.
And yeah, so the Thunder Warriors were used to capture Earth and capture Luna. And that was kind of their
Unification Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're going to take man into the stars, you want them under one ruler, and it might as well be me. Kind of thing.
So the total opposite of the Napoleon complex, because he was tall.
Because the actual origin of the Emperor of Man is like a little bit, let's say milky. It's a little cloudy, right?
A little vague.
There's
in terms of like how he came into being, or how he became how he came into power.
Both.
Okay.
There's stories of him like being portrayed as like a almost like Jesus-like figure, where he's going around Terra, like
But
helping
not a
people. Yeah, well, that's the thing. He's like, that's what I think kind of led to this, right?
I'm just going to be the little asterisk the entire time. It's like, he cured the blind, walked on water, not a deity. Doesn't want to be seen as God.
The biggest, like, first point where we for sure know he was there is the Unification Wars. He just shows up, and he's uniting everybody. In this case, by force.
It's a solid way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it was the fastest way, which is what he was concerned about.
Makes sense. What I'd be worried about.
Yeah.
Speed.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect example, because that's exactly what he's doing. He couldn't get everybody to agree. People wouldn't listen. Everybody wanted their own continents, islands, territories, and he was just like, "All right, I'm done with this entirely." And so he created the Thunder Warriors, and you had the Unification Wars, which brought Earth and Luna directly into, thank you, my dearest, directly into, I love you too, his control. And he solved world strife through violence, I guess.
So dictatorship is good.
Well, and that's what he landed on.
How would you compare him to Thanos?
Actually, it's not bad. Imagine Thanos, but you never had to find the Infinity Stones, and that's pretty close. He didn't really care. Like, the big difference is Thanos is. It depends on which Thanos you're dealing with, because Thanos in the comics, nothing like the God Emperor. Thanos, as portrayed by the MCU, it's closer, but Thanos seemed to care about the galaxy at large, and the Emperor does not. He wants
to make
humans.
death happy.
he wants humans to be on top.
Well,
Meanwhile,
yeah,
comic book Thanos wants to impress Death. So
yeah. I would say the Emperor Man does, in fact, care quite a bit about the cosmos, and that he wants everything under the control of man.
of man,
That
yeah.
was, that was the whole point. Like you have like the Treaty of Mars, and then the official founding of the Imperium of Man, and then sending out a fleet to the beginning of the Great Crusade, which is essentially what we still have going on today.
Yeah, that
But he
just kind
wasn't
of never
like,
stops.
I'm going to solve all of your problems by annihilating half of you, and then we can go from there.
No.
Now, the only reason the Unification Wars happened, honestly, is because he told everybody he was in charge, and people got upset about that, and he decided to shut them up.
So they attacked him, self-defense, understandable.
And that's such a gross oversimplification of the Unification Wars. Not where I expected. I expected to start at the Heresy, but
Basically,
yeah,
Germany won.
yeah,
That's the Imperium.
pretty close. Like,
Actually, yes.
that's pretty close.
Okay. Good
So-
starting point for us non-knowers of the universe.
Yeah, and bear in mind, I said at the beginning of the episode, this is Grimdark. There are no good guys. There's only the people in charge of your perspective. So
Yeah, I don't think there's a happy ending ever. There's no happy story in 40K.
no, there's not.
Mild
40K
depression to heavy depression.
40K is kind of like the Nazi army. They make super soldiers. They squash little people.
Well,
Yeah.
more so than that, the actual models that you get for, like, let's say I play Imperial Guard, right? I run a Cadian army. The actual models you get, particularly the commissars, are based off of German World War II military officers. The comparison is definitely valid. Yeah, there you go. So you do have an army, but you said you haven't started painting them. Do you know what you're going to do with them yet?
Oh, absolutely not. I think they're
Oh,
supposed
okay.
to be blue, though, because I bought the starter set. So
Oh,
what
is
you
that
guys
your
call them
Space
earlier?
Marines?
Blueberries?
Yeah, so that actually means very little. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay,
Because
so
my
anyway,
Space Marines are of a different faction.
Yeah.
well, and there are multiple factions of the Space Marines, which actually we'll get to it. Space Marines. Okay, cool. So the Space
What
Marines.
is a Space Marine, and why are they the best character in 40K?
Well, that depends because lore accurate Space Marines are not represented in the actual miniatures game.
He's missing his
Correct.
face.
But so the Space Marines, they came about as kind of the culmination, the cherry on top of the Emperor's experimentation. They are the successors to the Thunder Warriors, and they were supposed to be the big time. He took everything he learned by making the Adeptus Custodes and the Thunder Warriors and the time in between, and he finally learned, I know how to do this, and I know how to make them self-replicating, and I know how to do them in huge batches at a time. We're going to conquer the galaxy. And so this is where it's like, okay, not only did the Nazis win, but now they have access to Camino. Is the
They're
way
in
I'm going to put it.
space.
So Space Marines, when you're talking about Space Marines and their iteration, bear in mind that there were some stories that talk about how there were Space Marines made before the Primarchs. That gets super murky because unreliable narrators. And so what you need to know about Space Marines actually begins with the Primarchs.
Yes.
Now,
I mean, that makes sense because the DNA comes from them.
exactly right. So, the Emperor, taking everything he learned through, the genetic modification and the super soldier programs and everything that he did, took his own oomph, his own gusto, his genome, his everything that he could harvest from himself and use. And being an Eternal, he could harvest a lot because
His
he just
sock.
grows back.
This is just a very weird description.
Yeah. And he decided to use his own genetic material in order to make clones. Ultimately, they weren't actually clones, but it's close enough. He made 20 of them, although there are 2 of them that we don't talk about. And
Yeah, he made 22, but 2 were
no,
lost.
I thought it was 20, and there are 18 legions because there's 9 loyal, 9 heretic.
20 and then 2. Yeah, 20 and then 2 were lost.
Yeah, we
Did
don't
he
talk
just
about
lose them?
Yes, actually,
Well,
that's exactly
no,
what happened.
the Chaos Gods scattered all of the
Took 'em,
Primarchs
yeah.
across all of the galaxy, and they only recovered 18.
That's right.
Big fan of the Chaos Gods.
So He made these 20 clones. There are 2 of them that are called the Lost and the Damned that we don't talk about. And so we're going to focus on the other 18. And his clones were called Primarchs. Now, they were supposed to be at the forefront of a major genetic army, but this is where we get to introduce the next 4 primary characters in the story, and the fact that the Primarchs did not get to grow up around Terra or the Emperor or under the influence of mankind, really, because 4 primordial entities of magic, sure, took them and scattered them all over the galaxy. So let's talk about chaos, the chaos gods, and what that is. So, as I've already said, there are 4 chaos gods, and they each govern kind of a realm of chaos. But before we get into that, you need to know what chaos is and why the chaos gods can do what they do. So, chaos, or what's called, lots of clicking coming from Eric. Chaos, what is called the immaterium, is this antithesis of reality. Everything's kind of inverted. Your thoughts and your emotions become physical. Everything is beyond actual comprehension or logic. There are no rules. It's this place of pure kind of, I don't know how to put it other than like comic book terms. It's concepts of stuff given form in a formless space.
Scarlet Witch.
It's Scarlet Witch. It's Event Horizon. It's effectively like these spiritual realms jammed into one that layers on top of and through our material world.
Basically nonsense.
It's nonsense. Yeah, it's Wonderland if you had it written by H.P. Lovecraft and illustrated by H.R. Geiger. So yeah, it's a realm where there are no rules, so to speak. Which is ironic considering it's actually a place with far more rules that are more difficult to understand than ours, but what do I know? One of the fan theories is that this is a universe that is inverted to ours, very mirrored, based off of dark matter and antimatter and the fact that emotions are the physical things there and yada, yada, yada. So the 4 chaos gods govern and are controlled by 4 primary aspects of what makes up the immaterium. Now, the reason this is important is because our things that we have about us in the game, like our soul, for example, is of the immaterium. Our emotions, our souls, a lot of our personalities, and our dreams are all made up of the same stuff that make up the immaterium. There's a large amount of people that believe that if we didn't have souls, the immaterium wouldn't exist. In fact, there is hard evidence in the universe of if you don't have a soul, you are not affected by the immaterium at all. And so it's soul stuff, right?
Shang Tsung.
It's kind of, sure.
Mortal Kombat. Eating and controlling souls.
It's eating and controlling souls. So,
yes.
The big 4. You have Khorne, blood for the blood god. He's the lord of murder and violence.
Blood god.
Skulls for the skull throne. He is born of indolent rage and bloodshed. Anything that makes you yearn for violence or lean towards violence acts against other souls, this is what gives him power. And I say governs and are controlled by because when you look at Khorne, all violence, including the violence the Emperor is doing, gives blood to the blood god. But because he's a god of violence, he kind of doesn't have a whole lot of free will. He must act violently. Does that make sense?
You could hug someone violently.
Exactly right. In fact, there's a very famous phrase that says, "Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows." So if it's violently spilled, congratulations.
Blood for the blood god.
Blood for the blood god. Then you got his brother, Nurgle.
That's my favorite one by far, just in terms of the name.
So Nurgle is called Grandfather Nurgle, and he's a god of life, sort of. He's a god of growth. He's a god of immortality because he's a god of disease and virulence. He is the aspect of unchecked propagation. Anything rotting, disease-ridden, or cancerous is his domain.
Yeah.
And so I have always found it really interesting because effectively he's a god of entropy, but in a way that
I don't know
shows
what that means.
growth in life. Entropy is cosmic degradation. It's think about it at grand scale rot.
Okay,
Close enough.
the more you know.
Yeah. And so he's an entropy god. He's a god of decay and of rot and of disease, but in a way that brings boundless life
rebirth
and growth. Yeah. And then you get Tzeentch.
Tzeentch.
Yep. Now Tzeentch is a god of change. It's a god of deception, and most importantly, a god of magic. Now Tzeentch is the one that, like, all the depictions you try to get of higher dimensions and understanding and that kind of stuff, that's all Tzeentch's domain. Forbidden knowledge, secrets, and more importantly, change. They call him the change bringer, and that's because nothing should ever be still in his mind. You should always be evolving. You should always be changing. You should never be predictable. And there are ways that you can do that. And so what feeds him is the yearning for growth in the form of personal change, a yearning for knowledge, the desperate seeking of answers, and which subsequently has made him a god of magic. He's probably the one that's most difficult to
My
describe
stomach.
because he's very much like indescribable is kind of part of his thing. Like forbidden eldritch knowledge is his whole shtick. And so if Cthulhu had more avian features, you would be closer to Tzeentch.
Yeah, I think the best Tzeentch is typically used in the lore because of his magic, like his spell casting. Like that's pretty much what you should think of when you think of Tzeentch.
Yeah. And then lastly of the four, you get the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that's Slaanesh. Slaanesh is the god and goddess of excess and hedonism. And so pursuing pleasure and sensation and stimulation for the sake of getting more and more and more and more.
Being American.
Wow.
Ironically, we're far too prudish for that here. So now you're talking about a chaos god of drink, of food, of sex, of
it's
indulgence.
Dionysus. It's Dionysus taken to the extreme.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Dionysus in the extreme.
I don't even know what Dionysus is.
The Greek. Okay, what about Bacchus?
No.
Cool. Yeah, it's a party god. Think about it.
Toga parties.
Sure.
But yeah, Slaanesh is an entity devoid of gender because it has all genders, and there is no limit to the excess for which they will indulge. And this is taken to a very extreme place. This is the kind of thing that you see, like, the depictions of the levels of indulgence that Slaanesh has are usually taboo in regards to, like, the cultures we have on Earth. This is supposed to be depicted as indulgence that the gods are like, whoa, a little too far. Like, maybe we don't do that. And also the only one of the Chaos Gods that we have a definite origin for. We know exactly where it came from. There was a race, which I believe they were simply called the Eldar, or was Eldar what happened after? So the Eldar and their separation, the Drukhari, are an alien race that were within the Milky Way galaxy that effectively partied so hard because they created a utopian paradise that they kind of birthed a god of indulgence through psychic emission. And it destroyed their entire empire and their people and put them into an extraordinary state of existence that's all but extinct.
That's what you get for having fun.
That's what you get for having fun.
Happens to the best of us.
Those are the
like
four
your
Chaos
mom
Gods.
And dad catch you partying.
Yeah.
I
those
too
are the four
remember
Chaos
college.
Gods. So bloodshed, decay, magic, and hedonism. Those are your big ones. And we're going to loop back around to the Primarchs now. Effectively, the God Emperor of mankind was now at a state of being so powerful that he was rivaling any one of the Chaos Gods individually. And Tzeentch, as a person that can see all futures and all pasts, didn't really like the future that it was seeing and decided to team up with its siblings and stop the plan. And in doing so, stole all of the clones. Whether or not it stole the unnamed, untalked about clones is still up for debate. And scattered them to the far reaches of reality, right? And so that's where we get the, what's the name of it? The First Great Crusade bones?
It's just called the Great Crusade, yeah.
Yeah. And effectively, God Emperor of Mankind continued with the experiment, created the Space Marine Legions, which were kind of Xerox copies of the Primarchs, but in a significantly lesser form. Because what he did was make the Primarch, which is this one entity with all the mojo and all the good juice, and then use that to seed legions of hundreds of thousands.
So the leftovers.
Yeah. And so that is a Space Marine. A Space Marine is the lesser born child of genetic enhancement super soldier serum created from a Primarch. And the Great Crusade was the God Emperor of Mankind sending those legions out and saying, hey, out there is like one of my sons, please go get them. And
So
that's kind of what happened. And over the course of thousands of years, slowly the Primarchs were discovered.
thousands of years. Jesus Christ, it's way too long.
So here's the thing: at this point in the timeline, I think the first Great Crusade was pre 30,000. Like, we're still 20,000 years ago in the past of the game. Nice. So over the course, and the stories of the Primarchs getting discovered and being brought back into the fold are fascinating. But for the sake of our episode tonight, I'm going to just say, eventually, 18 of them were found. Perhaps 20 of them were found, but 2 of them had sinned in some terrible way, and we don't talk about them anymore.
So did they sin, or did they just not find them?
No one knows.
Yeah.
There is no answer.
There's no canon answer, at least, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what's nice about this game that I've come to realize? It was definitely done by politicians, because there's a lot of things that just get kind of glazed over. There's a whole lot of wishy-washy stuff, and it's actually part of the canon for it to be wishy-washy. I think that's fucking hilarious. Because, like, anytime I did research or anything on this game, like, it even tells you there are multiple different canons to something, so that way it's wishy-washy and you don't know.
Yep,
that's
exactly
fucking
right.
fantastic.
It all depends on who your faction is. The history was written by the victor, so it all depends on who you consider the victor.
But absolutely I like the fact that in the story, though, they still don't give the solid answer. Because a lot of other times, you get, like, in stories, you get solid answers. You get, like, this is how it happened, but all these people say this is how it happened. Like, in this one, there's none of that shit.
Yeah, it's nothing like that.
Yeah, no. There's 18 different stories to everything.
I think it's one of my favorite parts as well. I agree with what you're saying, because the fact that
when the world ends
deliberately, right? The fact it's deliberately and openly like, hey, there's no answer, and anybody that says they have an answer, they're lying to you. It also gives them narratively a lot of leeway, because when they decide to do something very big that would be significantly lore changing, there's always the plot holes and the pockets where they're like, you just didn't know all the information because you are small and but a single person. Yeah.
So, in everybody's opinion, do we feel like it's kind of lazy writing in a sense, because they've made it so they can always back themselves out of a corner?
No, not at all.
Or would you consider it like super uber writing, because they've made it so that way they can literally always change the story, unlike other
it's
stories?
somewhere in between. Like, it's not lazy writing. It's intentionally kind of vague, so that, because the lore is just being created by a vast amount of different people.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to make it, like, still make relative sense, they leave it vague, so then, like, an individual can fill in this little piece over here. But if then somebody writes something that contradicts it later, they can be like, oh, that's just because, like, you didn't understand everything that was going on when this happened.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything about the lore in 40K that you could call lazy per se. I think they knew they wanted it to last, because you're talking about this stuff came up in the 80s. We're 40 plus years of this game going, and they wanted to set it up where it's like, I want to bring in authors. I want to bring in many, many writers and designers. And we don't want to get bogged down with, oh, did Lieutenant Dipperface have 6 fingers or 5? And just have some fun with it. I think it was very wise from the early on team.
I like how it's done, mostly because it allows it does truly allow like a ton of fan theory, and like it's a more complicated version of like the Horde versus the Alliance, where like you have all of these options. It really bleeds into the nobody's right in this universe, but nobody's wrong, maybe, question mark. But like your faction, you have a way to like defend, but somebody else has a way to defend their faction because your faction might not know about this or that. So I like how it's done, and I like the ambiguity of it sometimes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The coolest part to me about it, now, this kind of stands in the face of the way the company is being run today, but the original motivation for a lot of this was because they wanted the players to be able to paint and write and do their own stuff. They wanted you to not just play their Space Marine army, they wanted you to have your own story.
Like fan fiction?
Yeah, they wanted
Callback.
your fan fiction in the game. That was from last episode for anybody that was interested. Bones, what you got?
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because there's actually a whole like giant chunk of fan fiction that people have made called the Dornian Heresy, which is like a reverse, like the good guys are the bad guys and the bad guys are the good guys. Relatively speaking, like the Horus Heresy has like certain Primarchs that rebel. We'll talk about that here shortly, I hope. But in this Dornian Heresy, it's like the opposite. Like the people who rebelled are the ones that were the loyalists.
So I'm going to jump in real quick. Robert from our Facebook chat asked, would you suggest learning the lore before choosing an army? No, I do not recommend that. I do not recommend that at all. Here's what you should do when choosing your army. You should look at the army's miniatures, and the first one that makes you go, that one's the coolest, you should play that army. That's it. That's the simple answer. There's so many. There are
like
so
those
many
wolf people.
Space wolves. We'll get into that for sure.
I think it's hard because also as editions come out, different armies become meta and different armies go down. I think the only one that they have truly kept consistently good to be a franchise getter-inner are Space Marines. I think they've been consistently decent, but they like shuffle with everyone else. But it's just like, okay, what edition are you playing? Makes your army good or bad, or what new things they've loaded.
I will say, this is my personal opinion. And so again, perspectives, right? This is my personal perspective. If you're getting into this game and getting into the lore and your goal is to win games, you're doing it wrong. You should not play this game like that. Now, is there a tournament circuit? Absolutely. Are there incredible strategists and players that are now world famous because of their ability to pilot their army? Absolutely. And that's a great scene. But
I'd say world famous. I mean,
yeah, relatively speaking,
Nerdverse famous.
Yeah,
but here's the thing:
Henry Cavill's the most famous 40K player.
Yes, he
is. He plays Custodes. But if that's what you're trying to get into, it is to win games. The lore is irrelevant. Don't care about it.
Yeah,
that's the answer. Like, you don't need to know any of the story to do what you do. Now, for those of us that are into the lore, it's fantastic. And I will tell you this, there is not a faction in this game that I think has bad lore or that are unplayable or uncomfortable. If you're getting into the hobby, as long as you're cool with the fact that for a lot of people, the army you're playing is going to be the bad guy, then you're golden.
They're all bad guys except for Salamander.
Except for the Salamanders, baby. It's actually kind of funny to watch me and Eric be lined up on that. But I digress. So,
when worlds collide.
Long story short, because I do want to get into the Horus Heresy before we run out of time tonight, the legions go out. They find all the Primarchs in various stages of world domination, bring them home, and everybody throws a big party, and the galaxy rejoices. Hooray! All of the invading armies now have their grand godlike leaders, and the God Emperor of Mankind now has his Space Marine legions, and the Great Crusade begins in earnest. Fast forward through a lot of violence, and we get to the Horus Heresy. Now, the Horus Heresy happened just after the 30th millennium.
It's right at the end of the Great Crusade.
Yeah. And ultimately, the Chaos Gods saw things going wrong and decided to meddle, depending on who you talk to. And
it's pretty straightforward that Lorgar was rebuffed by the Emperor in his desire to worship something, and then sought out the Chaos Gods.
yeah, but you also had the manipulations of the Chaos Gods with Horus before that I think really started the downfall. But Bones is not wrong. Bones is 100% accurate. So Lorgar, who was the leader of the Word Bearers at the time, they were called
Word Bearers.
Stand by
bearers
for
of the word.
Titanfall.
The Imperial Herald.
Is it Imperial Heralds?
Yeah.
Anyway, the Word Bearers. He saw his father. He saw the God Emperor as a divine entity. And wanted to worship him, wanted to exalt him, and that trait, that mental need to worship, got passed on to his legion. And when the Emperor basically boxed his ears and said, "Stop worshiping shit, you're not an idiot," he turned to the Chaos Gods, who were very much like, "Hey, want to worship something?"
We're big fans of worship.
Big fans here. So then enters
Especially the party one.
The Horus Heresy. Now there is a lot of shit that happens in the Horus Heresy. I'm talking 30 plus novels of shit happens in the Horus Heresy. There are some very key elements, like, Isfahan 3 and a whole bunch of stuff. But the long and short of it is that a civil war breaks out. Effectively, Horus, who was the God Emperor's favored son, he was the war master of the Legion, he was the big dick in charge, decides to rebel and go against his father, and takes his legions and starts that. And it split everything in half. 9 legions ended up falling. Again, this is a grossly oversimplified thing.
That's what we do here.
And it's also not accurate because it's 40K. 9 legions.
Was it 9?
Hey, as a Alpha Legion player, I say 10 legions are still loyal, but what do I know? And so you have War Master Horus and the backing of the heretic legions in a civil war across the galaxy against the God Emperor of Mankind and the loyal legions. Now, we will dedicate, if there's interest, we will dedicate an entire episode to the Horus Heresy. So for now, what you need to know is that conflict was unbelievably brutal and led to the deaths or the fall of many, many characters, including all of the Primarchs in one way or another. Now, that's, again, you gotta know. Anyway,
read the books.
You read the books.
They're all either missing, dead, like certainly dead, or they're chaos
turned
demons.
into demons. Yeah. So here's the thing about demons, guys. Demons are an incredibly powerful force dedicated to the powers of the warp, but demons don't have any free will. They are just as bound to their demon god and what motivates the demon god as everybody else. So there were several Primarchs that ascended to demonhood in the pursuit of immortality, that are now puppets of that chaos god because they became demons. They're invincible, like they are immortal. If you kill them, they just reform in the Immaterium and come back and do it again. But they no longer have any free will. They have no agency. So
give a little, get a little.
Give a little, get a little. Now, through the course of the Horus Heresy, all the Primarchs go down, but there's a few key features. First, the God Emperor of Mankind was trying to get into a synthetic dimension called the Webway. And one of the ways that he figured out how to do that, heavy air quotes here, was what's called it's the Golden Thrones thing. Bones, help me out. The big light.
Yeah. I mean, I would say he used the Golden Throne. It's kind of not that relevant.
So the Golden Throne.
An artifact.
Yeah, the Golden Throne is this artifact level piece of technology on Terra that he sat on, and what it did is allows navigation in the Immaterium. That's the whole point of it. You can now send your ship into the warp, and there is always a point that you can use to triangulate your position and navigate space in the Immaterium. The Astronomicon, that's what it's called.
Yeah. And
the Golden Throne does that. Now,
isn't that going through hell or something?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
The
Golden Throne.
the warp and the immaterium are the same thing, and that is essentially like I said, it's the negative verse. It's DC's dark multiverse. Yeah.
Yeah. The Astronomicon allows you to use that space. Now, it's still incredibly dangerous, and there's a whole bunch of fucking problems with it, but that's what it does. Now, the Golden Throne is designed to function off of a person that has to be a very powerful psyker, and is also a complex life support system and yada, 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 because it needs to never turn off. Now, there's a whole bunch of debate on whether it was supposed to be Magnus in the chair, whether it was supposed to be the Emperor in the chair, or his big psychic advisor guy, whose name I don't recall, was supposed to be in the chair. Ultimately, the Emperor ends up in the Golden Throne, entombed in his own chair, because he is destroyed, but he's an Eternal. And so now he's in his chair, and he is activating it, and is a psychic light in the darkness, but his body is all but dead. It is a corpse sitting in the chair, powering a lighthouse in hell.
What a way to go.
What a way to go. Now, whether he's alive or dead or has conscious thought or is a vegetable or whatever, that's what everybody is fighting about. And it's here where he is where he's either dead or a vegetable in his perpetual life support system, that people are like, hey, we can navigate hell, and we just beat the Horus heresy, and now mankind is spreading out throughout the galaxy, and it was the Emperor. The Emperor is a god. He does divine things. We should worship the Emperor. And the ecclesiarchy is created, and they start worshiping a dead guy in a chair as god, and it, in the system, works. Their faith is tangibly rewarded. And so that had an interesting side effect. Not only is their faith rewarded, but a stunted mind, a mind bulwarked by hatred and rhetoric and religious indoctrination, is resistant to corruption from the war. As soon as the people that are in charge, now that the Emperor is out of commission, learned that a hate-filled, religiously indoctrinated population is more resistant to the enemy's infiltration, they leaned into that hard. And now we have the Imperium of Man, where worship of the God Emperor is mandated and driven into you from birth as they attempt to fight their way across the galaxy.
Wow. Hey, Bones, what was the part? Or what did you want us to talk about before we get going? What was the part of the 40K you wanted to talk about?
I don't remember bringing anything up.
Yeah. Anyway,
maybe I'm seeing things. I don't know. You know, it's life.
So yeah, that's what happens in about the year 30,000 and continues for the next 10,000 years, all the way through to the present day. And I'm going to have some listeners that are like, I thought if all the Primarchs are missing or dead or demons, what's going on? As of recent, there has been 2 that have been brought back.
Oh,
Primarchs.
The missing 2 we don't speak of?
Nope, we don't talk about those.
Ah.
The 2 that have been discovered, and by I mean discovered, bear in mind that's very relative, is Roboot Gilliman, who everybody cannot agree on how to say his name. Robout Gilliman is the leader of the Ultramarines and is the first Primarch to come back since the Horus Heresy. And here's what we know about him, is they woke him up through heretical stuff, like it goes against the doctrine. They used alien technology and brought in help from alien species, and it was a whole thing. And he woke up, and he's like, wow, the universe is pretty shitty. I better go talk to Dad about this. And they said, yes, you should go see the God Emperor, because it's been 10,000 years of them being indoctrinated to worship this guy. He walked into the throne room, stayed there for 13 minutes, and walked back out and changed the way shit worked. We don't know what happened in that throne room, what he said or found out, or what's going on. He then rallied up the entire mankind's Imperium, including the Adeptus Custodes, which were supposed to only guard Terra, and went, nope, we're going to war. And he started the Indomitus Crusade, which is where we currently are. And he kind of did that unopposed. Sorry, go ahead.
Also, I mean, I assume you're getting to Lion.
Yes. So here's what you got to know as we get into the Lion. Now, the Ultramarines and Robout Gilliman, that's pretty basic knowledge. It's what you're dealing with in Space Marine and Space Marine 2 and all of that kind of jazz. But here's what you need to know. After the Horus Heresy and the fall of the Emperor and the destruction of all the Primarchs and all the fuckery, is they decided that they could never let anything like the Horus Heresy ever happen again. And they decided to take the legions, which numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and break them up into what's called a chapter. And so the maximum number of Space Marines that can belong to any martial singular force is now 1,000? Bones?
Is it 1,000 or 10,000, something like that?
It's either 1,000 or 10,000.
Now, do you mean these fancy guys, or do you mean like regular soldiers?
Those fancy guys.
I mean, total. Like, whether it's the grunt that cooks food in the morning, which it's not because they're effectively warrior monks, which we'll get into later.
1,000, yeah. 1,000 Space Marine chapters with 1,000 soldiers per chapter.
Yeah, separated into 2 battalions. So, any Space Marine chapter is now only allowed to have 1,000 warriors. And what that was supposed to do is make it where nobody has the numbers or the forces to really rebel against the Empire's control ever again. And that's where we get the chapters that you're familiar with. The Ultramarines, the Salamanders, the White Scars. All of these people that you see in the Space Marine games are chapters that were formed after the dissolution of the legions at the end of the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, they have a name. What do they call them? Descendant something. The chapters that are like they come from another, like one of the founding chapters. All the chapters come from one of the founding chapters.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's now I'm going to be stuck on founding chapters.
I'm more impressed at the names that you guys can remember.
Well, so after everything, we ended up with the founding chapters. These are the chapters that originally belonged to the Primarchs. They are still functioning. They are still using the same gene seed, and they are still doing what they're doing. You got the Ultramarines, the Dark Angels, the Iron Warriors. Successor chapter. Well, yeah. Anyway, the World Eaters, the Word Bearers, the Blood Angels, the Night Lords, the Iron Hands, the Emperor's Children, the Imperial Fists, the Space Wolves, the Death Guard, the White Scars, the Alpha Legion, Salamanders,
Space Wolves for life,
Raven Guard, and Thousand Sons. I'm actually an Alpha Legion loyalist personally, but when it comes to loyalist chapters, if I had to pick one, it would definitely be Salamanders. Now, each of these have their individual styles, their individual iconography, their own tenets, and their own way they do things that are all based off of their Primarch. And their later successor chapters that spawned off of this, for example, the Black Templars are actually descendant of Rogel Dorn, which would be the
Imperial Fists.
Imperial Fists, thank you, Bones. They all use the same gene seed, but the Imperial Fists and the Black Templars have radically different points of view. In order to control all of this, there was a set of rules in place, which some people say was written by Robot Gellerman, but he was technically dead at the time, so I don't know how he would have done it, but what do I know? Called the Codex Astartes. And the Codex Astartes is the big book of rules on how you have to do shit.
Are we?
And there are a handful of chapters out there that looked at that book of rules and kind of laughed and did their own thing anyway. And then there's some that read the book of rules and said, this is pretty good. We'll just ignore chapter 42 and we'll be okay.
And then there's the Ultramarines.
And then there's the Ultramarines who took that book, set it down, and said, this is the way we do shit. The Space Wolves are probably the most famous example of the Marines that laughed at the Codex Astartes and did it their own way anyway. The Black Templar are definitely up there because they decided to ignore the 1,000-person limit because if you were on crusade, your numbers didn't count. And so they just said, we're always on crusade. Huzzah! And kept making more soldiers.
Yes.
And then, of course, you have the Traitor Legions because the Traitor Legions, the 9 Traitor Legions, are now considered arch enemy of the Imperium. They do not get any resources or help or anything. And so even carrying the gene seed of a traitor Primarch, they just want to kill you. Like, there's no wiggle room with that.
So even after everything, they still kill each other.
Yes.
But aren't there some traitor legions that don't believe they're traitor legions?
Alpha Legion. So that depends on who you talk to.
Okay.
most of the Traitor Legions, I'm going to be honest with you, not only do they know they're Traitor Legions, but they like it that way. They kind of see the God Emperor, once he started being worshipped, they were like, all of mankind is now stagnant. They're so afraid of AI that they don't allow new technologies to be developed. They see technological advancement as heresy, and we really need to stop them because they won't stop making war. And so you have certain Traitor Legions that are like, they're still the good guys in their eyes, but they're enemies of the Imperium. And so, yeah. Most notable is, let's see, you have the Iron Warriors, Iron Hands. Iron Warriors? There's a loyal one and a not loyal one. The Black Legion, which were formerly the Sons of Horus. The World Eaters, the Word Bearers, the Night Lords. The Death Guard, the Alpha Legion, and the Thousand Sons are all Traitor Legions. And are
with
no
better
longer part
names. Understandable.
Yeah. So that's where we get the video game. That's where you get, who are the Ultramarines? The Ultramarines are the 1,000 soldiers that are still dedicated to the Codex Astartes that are born of the gene seed of Robout Guilliman, who led the initial Ultramarines Legion in the Horus Heresy.
I think it's a good point to do one thing real
And
quick.
now
That
we're
was a
done.
lot of education today, which is good. When I paint a mini, do you guys paint it in pieces and then put it together? Or do you put it together and then paint it?
I'm a partials guy. I put it together except for occluding pieces, and then I paint it.
What do you mean, including pieces?
You're holding a Space Marine, so that's a pretty good example. I will assemble it except for the arms and the backpack, and I'll paint it. And then I'll paint the arms and the backpack. Then I glue it all together.
Ooh, I should glue these, huh?
How is it being held together?
It's got nipples. You
Oh,
connect
he's got
the
it.
nipples.
Okay, those are push fit.
Yeah.
So it's like
Oh.
a starter set. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still should glue
I
it,
was
but
like,
I'm not an expert. You know what? It's your minis, your hobby. You do you, buddy. You go to town.
Yeah, but that's why I'm getting stuff. What's up, James?
I do have one interesting thing unrelated to painting minis. That's just like a little interesting fact about Space Marines 2. There's a character in there that was a child during the Horus Heresy, and is now an Ultramarine.
Yeah,
Is that weird?
that's super weird. That's a 10,000-year-old human.
I mean, they lived for so goddamn long.
So even the Astartes living more than 400 or 500 years is ancient. Like, you're talking, unless you're a dreadnought, dreadnoughts don't count. Dreadnoughts are a whole different problem.
Dreadnoughts are awesome, and the VA wishes they had some. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, we were talking about this before the episode. Listen, if you understood exactly what it took to become a dreadnought and what they did to you to get you there, you would not be nearly as excited. Because yes, the VA wishes they had dreadnoughts, but not for you, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even the process of becoming a Space Marine is freaking terrible.
Yeah, and kills most people.
And then you have to just die again almost, and then go through another terrible process.
So here's the way most of the Space Marine chapters work, right? Now, everybody has their own methods. It's part of being in the chapter that the way you recruit new soldiers is very important. It's sacred, right? But a Space Marine has a gland in their body. I don't remember what it's called. It's got a goofy-ass sci-fi name. And what it does is it creates gene seed. And it makes two. You have the gene seed that runs the Space Marine, and then it makes a second one that can be extracted and used to make another Marine.
It's adorable.
So I'm like a plant, is what you're saying? Is you would be like a plant?
Kind of.
One time. You can propagate one time.
Yeah, I'm not sure in the lore on whether you can continuously grow them. There's a chance for that, but I know that they grow a second one. They use that to make a new Space Marine. And so you have exponential recruiting, which was the problem with the original Legions. Now, in order to become a Space Marine, you have to be selected, usually from a very primitive place, because Space Marine chapters keep whole worlds in a savage Stone Age in order to find the best warriors and the ones that are easiest to control, because the Space Marines are the angels of the Emperor, and so they are literally mythical figures that come down to your planet and say, "That one, I want Timmy," and they take you aboard their spaceship and go to heaven.
So they get the guy that lifts the biggest trees and throws the biggest rocks.
Or kills the most in the blood battles, or whatever. Depends on the chapter.
Which is fine because it all feeds my blood god.
Yeah. You then get strapped down to a table. They cut you open. They hit you with crazy growth x-rays and super soldier serum. They give you an incredible amount of cybernetics. They use your genome to grow dozens of new organs and bits and pieces, and they stretch you into a super soldier. And if you were extraordinarily lucky, you die during that. If you're not, you get to go into the hypnotherapy and indoctrination, where they go into your brain and teach it how to think. And if you get through all of that, congratulations. Your reward is hundreds of years of battle service on a spaceship that's meant to be a monk's cathedral and monastery that flies through space. And you get to wake up, pray, eat, and fight. That's it.
Vikings.
No, because you don't get to party. Now, Space Wolves are a little different, but there are
Space Wolves made
exceptions.
their own booze. I read that. Oh, and Robert
No, they didn't
said,
just make booze. They made booze that the smell of it kills humans. It is so potent.
Robert said progenoid. If I said that right?
Yes, the progenoid gland
Yep.
makes the gene seed. Thank you. Big thumbs up to Robert Garcia in our chat. Thank you very much. So that's
I don't know how y'all remember all of the names of this crap. I'm like, it's that one thing.
This is a special interest of mine. I actually can get lost in this lore really, really easily. It's a fascination. I'm always thinking about it. It's my Roman Empire. Interesting factoid, the original Ultramarines, before they became the poster childs, were actually based on the Romans. Their iconography and their armor setup was all Roman inspired.
What iconography?
Iconography?
Whatever.
They're symbols.
It's been a high learning day for Eric. Leave him alone.
They're pictures,
Hieroglyphics.
Eric. No, that's the Thousand Suns. Anyway.
Fuck.
Now, before we get into it, guys, I want to do a couple of things. That has been a long-winded, if super truncated history on the 40K universe, why everybody's fighting, and what a Space Marine is. They basically hate everybody because you get they're not human. And with the exception of the salamanders, most of them don't even really give a shit about humans. They're just there to serve the God Emperor. I hope you enjoyed it, but I do want to take a moment while we have everybody here, and I want to let everybody know that our beautiful young Clark here is going to be leaving us all behind in order to pursue some kind of enrichment of life or some
Parenthood.
such.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I gotta ditch you for my baby.
She's out making her own little Space Marines here. So she's actually going to be leaving the show. So
yeah,
I want to be the first to say, Clark, I am so happy that you decided to join us, and I'm going to miss you. I hope you do make your way back.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm sad to go, but excited for the next chapter because somebody has to continue to make gamers.
Absolutely.
I will also say, like, I was at PAX with my friend who's also pregnant, and she also games with me, and she refused to wear a shirt that another friend made for me, which said, obviously breedable, potentially submissive.
Awesome.
And I was just like, oh, come on. So yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun. It'll be a tiny gamer. We already have kind of like TV toys that are PlayStation controllers, and
there you go. Get them started early.
Game Boys. He'll have a Star Wars themed room.
Ooh.
So yeah, got
one
like
of the
a little
best verses.
Little wall decal that said he will be a Jedi just like his father before him. So it's very cute. I'm excited. But yeah, it's getting to the point where I can't sit for long periods of time. I'm always tired.
Well, I hope that I speak for the entire Crossing crew when I say that we love you very much and we wish you the best. We are going to miss you so very much.
I'm sure I'll drop in from time to time. If you guys have anime ones, I'll poke my head and be like,
Fantastic.
Juan from Too Legit to Crit also is wishing you the best.
Oh, thanks, Juan.
We do those nice crossing shows with them.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to. Now you only have one. They're not rogues, but what are they?
Skulkers? Stalkers?
No.
I don't remember. Yeah, our
Only
ongoing...
one of us can roll 4s, so it's fine.
Our ongoing campaign with Too Legit to Crit and our crossover podcast RPG is going to be down just a player. So maybe we can convince her to come back for just those sessions.
Yeah, or you can get Bones to do it, and then you'll have to let me know how my character heroically died trying to get into another event.
I'm about it. All right, guys, I do want to give a shout out. I know everybody has been messaging and is very excited about the promotional show for Survive. We are still very much planning on doing that. Things are a little kind of out of order. Of course, we have Clark leaving. We wanted to make sure and give her an appropriate send-off. We have a lot of stuff going on. So that is still coming out. So be on the lookout for that. I'm very excited about it. And I'm going to take this moment in order to do all the good algorithm things and remind you guys that, hey, we are as beholden to our evil overlords as everybody else. And if you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up, give us a share, tell your friends about it, keep us on mute in the background. I don't really care. But yeah, all those algorithm things help us kind of keep the lights on and keep doing this show. So I would really appreciate it if you did all the cool stuff.
I'm so excited to see what Eric is like rolling around looking for.
So I did a thing.
Uh-oh.
Did you make the condoms?
Oh, what do we got? Is that Corvus?
Yeah, Corvus killing an Alpha Legion.
Killing an Alpha Legionnaire.
Travis painted that for me.
I didn't make the condoms because nobody wanted their face on them.
I wonder why.
I still kind of wish I would have signed off on that. I wonder how many of them would have sold. Like,
you can still do it, Ryan. All you.
Oh, so our card sleeves.
I had these made.
Oh, nifty.
Yeah, those are the ones. The spiral, the vortex of our logo was supposed to be inverted. And so now it looks very, very pale.
Actually, the gray was supposed to be darker, I thought, when I designed it, which is no fault of Dragon Shield. Totally my fault. In the picture, it looked a lot better. I'll probably do it with black next time. But,
yeah, if there's interest in those, guys, be sure and hit us up. Send a message, put a comment on the video, because we can get those on the Crossing the Nerdverse merch shop. They would be available.
Well, I can't get them there. I can get them, though, but what I want to do is I think I'm going to do a giveaway for this one, because this is my extras.
Oh, fantastic.
So I want to wait and see.
Yeah, but you just opened it. Now it's no longer a collector's edition.
It doesn't need... Someone's going to use them anyway. I had to open it to show. Anyways, so I'm thinking about doing something like that if we can get enough people on watching us live one of these upcoming episodes.
Absolutely.
Custom made, they're pretty neat.
Who makes them?
Dragon Shield.
Additionally, guys, if you like the 40K lore, we could do episodes about this nearly every week. So let us know what you are hoping to hear. If there's interest, we are really considering a Horus Heresy expose. So let us know in the comments.
I think we should definitely talk a little bit about the game next week because we kind of peppered everyone with lore. So kind of work people into next week being a little bit more gamey, like maybe some miniature thingies, maybe the game itself if Bones gets on it in time.
40K is also getting a secret levels episode, I believe, as well. And then I think Henry Cavill's doing an Amazon Prime show.
Supposed to be happening, but it's very up in the air currently.
Honestly, I'm hoping it's just him reading me 40K lore. I'll take it. Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
Tarps off or tarps on?
Doesn't actually matter.
But all right. I think the biggest problem you're going to have with him making that real quick is just like his love of being a nerd is going to make it very hard to make. Because I don't know if, since it's his project, I don't think he's going to concede on any points. So it's going to get interesting.
That's what I think the most recent
take forever.
The most recent news I heard is that he's kind of having trouble with Amazon because he is very loyal to the source material.
And that's a very dark world.
It is indeed. All right, and with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Congratulations, you've been with Crossing the Nerdverse. Today, we stopped off in the dimension of Warhammer 40K. It's been wonderful talking to you guys, and we'll catch you next time.